Welcome. I'm Karen Griffith-Grega, Chief Investment Officer of Dreamit. Welcome to the next in our series of the Dreamit Athena Expert Series, where we bring actionable information to our female founders to increase the probability of success and raising follow-on funding. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Sheryl Schultz with us. And Sheryl is going to share with us her expertise. So Sheryl, do you want to give us a brief background on yourself?
Sure, that's my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Karen. So I am a very long-time startup marketer. I actually grew up in the telecommunications world. For those of you who are using your phones, that didn't happen a long time ago. And basically, I grew up when the phone companies were putting all the infrastructure into place to allow all of those services to happen. And during that period of time, I launched dozens and dozens of those companies. 27 of them exited. Of those, 5 went public and 20 of them were acquired. So it was a really heady time for me as I launched them into the marketplace. In really the early 2000s, I decided to step back from that. I was doing angel investing in the telecommunications space, and I decided to join an angel investment firm to help empower women. And so I joined Golden Seeds, and for a couple of years, I was simply a member. I often call that the institutionalized stage of my angel investment career. I actually learned what it meant to put a company under a microscope and really look at it, although often what you look at and what happens in the end don't equate. But after 2.5 years, my current business partner and I ended up running Golden Seeds for 2 years in the Boston area. We actually were the first to build open office hours in this community, really helping women to learn about the fundraising process and how to market their businesses. And then subsequently, the two of us separated, my partner and I, and came back again to start CabinetEM.
So tell us a little bit about CabinetM.
Yeah, totally my pleasure. I can talk about CabinetEM all day, but I won't. So, well, the first thing is everyone who needs to market in your audience, which is everyone, should go on to CabinetEM, because CabinetEM is a place where you can find the tools, the marketing tools and technology that you need in order to execute your marketing programs. It's a very, very rich place of 5,000 plus profiles on every type of tool you could possibly want to use for marketing. And in that environment also is a workspace where you can save the things that you find, because marketers often don't think about their programs of today. They think about, what am I doing today and what am I going to do next quarter or the quarter after? Or, this is a cool tool, I think I'll just save it and maybe I'll need it one day. And what you can do once you save things is you can share them. You can share them within your organization. You can share them with peers. You can then build your marketing stacks. So we'll speak a little bit from now about what digital marketing has done to organizations and to the marketing world. But on our site, you can actually build out your full marketing stack so you can visualize it and then annotate it with what it is you're spending, how those programs have performed, so that people inside your organization don't use the same tools that have failed for you and spend the money again. So it's a very rich environment for marketers to collaborate, find what they need, qualify tools, and then manage their tool suite going forward.
So let's step back a bit, right? Because we have some companies in our program that, are early stage and the founder is the marketer. So, pretty basic, but could you define marketing stack for us and what that really means?
Sure. So once upon a time ago, we spoke about our marketing programs. And I used to be able to put my marketing program on one sheet of paper. And there was a list going down the left side, and it said things like direct mail or conferences, speaking opportunities, PR, maybe some advertising, maybe some banner ads. And when I did that, I knew I had everything covered, and I can make little check marks to talk about the different pieces and parts and how they work together in order to generate leads or awareness. The world of digital has significantly changed marketing, so that marketers are using large sets of tools at any given time in order to do their job. And often they don't have a snapshot of what those look like and how they stack together. So the same way that engineers have been speaking about their engineering stacks for the past 5 to 10 years, marketers are starting to talk about their technology and tool sets in the same way. So what we've done is we've given a marketer the ability to visualize all of the things that they're using and how they snap together, and then share them so that across our platform and across really the marketing world, you can look at what layers am I missing? Maybe another company like you is implementing, landing page optimization tools and, video marketing, in addition to some lightweight marketing automation. And you look at it and say, that company looks just like me, but I'm not implementing video marketing, so maybe I should take a look. What I would expect in the young companies in your audience is that many of them are doing social, because social comes at very, very light cost. And so, what I find when I look across somebody's social stack is that they're often using 5 or 10 different tools to optimize their Twitter reach. They may be using Hashtagify or BuzzSumo, and they're looking at ways to both reach influencers inside of their environment, or to really be part of the conversation in Twitter around different topics, and that's where all your hashtags come in. So if you're not using Hashtagify, it's a great tool.
Okay. So just, really quickly, again, to kind of get people's heads around what this means.
Yes.
You talked about landing page optimization. You talked about Twitter hashtags. I'm sure it's SEOs in there. Like, just rattle off kind of all the things that, kind of fall within your purvey as quick as you can think of them.
So, you know what? So that would be really hard. It would take up the rest of the day because we have 350 different categories.
Wow.
But really, if you think about it, there are super categories. So there may be things like advocate marketing. Okay, and underneath there, you might look at, personas. You may look at influencer marketing. You may look at ways of leveraging your Facebook likes. So there are companies right now that just look at the likes and leverage those in order to help you really engage with your true folks, the true fans that you have. So those are companies like Crowdly or Maverick. There are companies that just help you do A/B testing. There are companies that help you just bring everything into a common dashboard. There are companies that help you model what the expenses are, folks like Allocadia. There are folks that will help take all of your data and connect it into Salesforce, people like Circle CRM Insights. And so there are just thousands and thousands of these sorted across hundreds of categories. And the truth is, you just need to get started slow. You don't want at this stage to really overwhelm yourself with marketing. There are some basics that you should get in place, but don't try and do them all.
So say someone's just getting into the game, right? What are some of the basics that you recommend starting with?
So you really need your social presence. I really recommend that everybody, sort of start with really your website. I mean, that sounds really simple, but there are different ways that you can optimize that so that, I think about Optimizely, for example. So on our website, at different times, we'll serve up different headlines and just look at the engagement and the click-through. So, we're going to talk a little bit about positioning today, but one of the things that you want to do is you want to test your positioning and you want to be able to iterate on it. And by using tools on your site like Optimizely or Unbounce, you get to test in different places on the site, both the verbiage you're using and also the different flows that you have. And that's really, really important. So, one of the things that's really important for a marketer to understand, or, the CEO of a company that's never done any marketing before, is find tools that are really simple to use. If you find yourself bogging down in one, get out of there. We had that experience ourselves. So CabinetEM is 2.5 years old. We've had a number of, even though Anita and I are both longtime marketers, we don't do digital marketing. And so we've had a parade of 3, part-time digital marketers. We started with somebody who was really thoughtful and strategic, and we thought that they would be strategically tactical, and they weren't, and we moved on really quick. And we went on to someone who was good at implementing, but not good at iterating. And so that's the really important part here, which is we have 27 tools in our stack. So we have 3 different email platforms because we use them for different reasons. For one, we use it to cleanse lists and to test lists and to seed content so that the spam filters don't keep us from going out and doing what it is we want to do with our content. We use one because it's stupid simple, like MailChimp. But, we looked at a lot of automation platforms, and we looked at HubSpot, and it was really expensive. And we realized that the majority of what we wanted from them was the ability to, just automate trigger emails, automate nurturing emails. I'll come back to that in 2 seconds and define them. And so we ended up using a very simple platform called Klaviyo, which is spelt really weird. It's Klaviyo, and they've been just fantastic. They've been easy to work with, they've been simple to use, and they're inexpensive. So when we started, I think we were paying $100 a month for that platform. And, I think right now we may be paying $2,000, and it's just a function of how much traffic and how many people we're sending information to. But, being able to go try things and then get out of them when they aren't working is important. And to come back to that point, we originally used Kissmetrics in order to really get back a lot of data about what our cohorts were doing. And what we found was that we could do a little bit in Klaviyo and a little bit in Google Analytics and a little bit in Intercom. We used all of those for analytics so that we didn't have the pain of implementing Kissmetrics. And so testing and trying tools is really important. And today, if you come to our stack, and maybe I'll try and get into one of those later and just show it to you, there are a lot of things that we've tried and we've discarded them because they just didn't make sense for us at our size, given the amount of effort that would go into it.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's great. So it sounds like, even for those entrepreneurs that need an education on the landscape, they can go to CabinetM and just get a sense of the overall landscape.
Yes, they can. And more what's happening is that marketers are starting to share their stacks. We have an environment on the platform called Stacks Up and Stacks Insights. And you can go there and you can see what other people are implementing and what they're implementing alongside one another. Our ultimate goal is to be able to look at someone's stack and say, other companies like you who are in the B2B marketing, who are marketing to B2B companies who are, large and focused on healthcare, they're also using these tools or these layers. Or if you're using tool A and B, you should also be looking at C because other marketers like you are doing that.
Oh, that's fantastic insights. That's great.
Yeah.
So let's move back a little bit, right? So, you talked about how digital marketing has really changed the landscape. Share with us your framework, right? Why has digital marketing so fundamentally changed things?
Yeah, so some of this is really about the role of marketing. So digital has really elevated marketing inside of organizations. Marketing has become mission critical. The role that it used to play, it used to be responsible for awareness and for knowledge and for interest, but it didn't have to take the buyer through the funnel. So I'm sure lots of folks have spoken to your cohort about, about the sales funnel, or about, just the funnel, starting at the top and making your way down. Marketing today is responsible for a large amount of that funnel. It's responsible for demand generation. It's responsible for conversion. It's responsible for relationship management. And then it's responsible for propagation. So in today's world, 57 to 100% of buyers will start making their decision before they ever speak to a salesperson. And that becomes marketing's role. So, another way of saying it is marketing is responsible for customer acquisition and the cost of it. It's responsible for the revenue that's coming into the organization, and it's responsible for the customer lifetime value. How much will that customer spend over the course of, its engagement with you? And that has made it very, very difficult for the marketer to rely on the tools that they used to use, because marketing and digital marketing is different. What works for me is not going to necessarily work for you. And what works for me today won't necessarily work for me 3 months from now. And such is the nature of what's going on inside of organizations today. So at any one given time, if I look at a very large organization, they may be using anywhere from 60 to 100 tools en masse across the organization. But in addition to that, they're also testing between 20 and 30 tools at any given time. And, it's critical for them to be able to understand the results and to measure what it is that they're getting in order to do their job. So marketing has become, in many ways, a technical role. And folks who have not changed with the times are really struggling. One of the other things that we see inside of marketing organizations is that you can't just look for a marketing manager or a digital marketing manager anymore. You need to understand the skills that you're looking for. So, when we looked, oh, that was nice. So you're getting some atmosphere. My lights just went out. So what happens when we look for marketers, even here, is that we're very, very specific about the skills that we want. We want people who have used customer acquisition tools. We want folks who have used, who have done a lot of A/B testing. So, the same way that engineering has been very clear about the fact that they might want a front-end developer who understands HTML and CSS and, JavaScript, marketers are now faced with that same issue of articulating the skills that they want.
Okay. All right. So I know we want to talk about positioning, and I want to get into that next.
Yep.
But obviously the metrics of customer acquisition cost and lifetime value of customers are critical KPIs or metrics for any of our entrepreneurs.
Yes.
What advice do you have for the early stage entrepreneur in really approaching how to understand that when they're starting from a green field?
Yeah. So here's what I'll tell you. I know a lot. I've spent a lot of time with young companies, and so KPIs were always really familiar to me. And the act of actually calculating all of these different metrics were really, really familiar. But even when I sat down to wire up what hours were, I really spent a lot of time looking at different slide shares. I mean, it is really, there's a universe of great information out there, and you really need to access it. But here's what's more important for a young company. Pick 5 metrics that are important for showing that your business is working. Do not try and do everything at once. So for us, when we started, we decided that our most important metrics were really about traffic, how much traffic were we acquiring? Of that traffic, what percentage of it was converting to registered users? And then how often were those registered users coming back to our site? And then after that, what were they doing there? So how many pages were they looking at? And how long was it taking for those pages to be viewed? So those were the 5 that we picked. We're a marketplace. And so those were the 5 that we picked on the marketplace, on the marketer side. On the marketing technology side, we actually created all of the 5,000 profiles that are on the site. And now we're driving marketing technology companies to claim their profiles and build them out. So we measured ourselves. Very simple. How many were claimed? How many were updated? Period. So very, very simple, very simple metrics to look and see, were our basic assumptions about the fact that marketers wanted to find technology and that marketing technology companies cared about being in a place where marketers were already looking. That was the basic premise of CabinetEM. So looking at those KPIs made a lot of sense to us. Mm-hmm. And that's where we started, and it's where we stopped in the beginning. We subsequently introduced a stack configurator. And so now what we do is we measure how many are created every month. And we actually look at it. We look at how many created monthly, but the rest of our KPIs we look at weekly. We think it's really important. We think there are a lot of changes that happen week to week, particularly when you measure those based on how visible you've been in the marketplace or any event that you've participated in where someone would know to look for you. So it's that, sort of natural organic search sort of taking place. But, in stacks, we'll look at how many layers are in the stack and how many products are people using across it, because that informs us on how, in general, marketers are using the configurator. So we keep it very, very simple because we're a young company, and if we measure too much, it won't even be meaningful. So just do it slow and steady. And so I want to say something about that from the investor side, because I think this is important too. One of the disconnects sometimes between, what we know to be true as young companies and what investors want to see is really important. So investors will sometimes ask for huge amounts of data based on your KPIs. And the reality is, I think that it's important, and we do it, to say to those investors, I understand that you believe that we should have lots and lots of data, and we do. But the things that we're focused on is this set, and here's why. And so I think it's important for us to own, our own truths around what's important data and what isn't. Because we're young companies, and we only have, so many hours of the day. We're doing, 5 to 10 jobs each as founders. And the burden of trying to analyze too much data just sucks up too much unnecessary time. So.
Wow, that's really powerful advice. Thanks for sharing that, because every one of our companies faces that situation.
Yeah.
So one more kind of practical question, then we'll move into positioning.
Yep.
You had talked about slide shares. Are there particular repositories that you found incredibly useful on the marketing side?
What I can do is I can actually send those to you. We actually do have 3 or 4 that we use regularly, and I can send them to you so that you can share them with the different Dreamit organization members.
Great. Fabulous. Okay. So let's talk about positioning. Yeah. What is positioning and why is it important?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things, I'm just going to roll this back a drop.
Okay.
One of the interesting things about marketing in an early stage company is that it's really challenging, right? You have no budget, you have no resources, you have no brand awareness out there, and there's a constant pressure to demonstrate revenue success. People say, if I get money, if someone will pay for this, then I can get an investor to put money into me. Okay, and that's what we live, right? So what happens because of that is, customer acquisition is the focus. And if you have a marketing plan, it's really very, very tactical. But the missed opportunity there is that you never develop a strategy and you don't really look at your positioning. So, positioning is really the foundation that you build your entire messaging upon. Okay, companies, what you want to do is own an idea or own a set of ideas that have strong benefits to your end user. And it's really something that you can do right away. There's a reason that every one of, the companies in your accelerator started their business. There was a basic assumption around a pain point that they identified, and then they went about building this other construct as a way of solving that pain. What you want to do is define your position in the market. You can define it relative to other things that people are doing. So I often speak to companies in my other role as an an angel investor, and I'll say, so who do you compete with? And they'll say, we don't have any competitors. And the reality is that people today are doing something. It may not help them. It may be awkward. It may take too much time, but they're probably doing something to communicate, to buy, to make the world better. And so even if you articulate what it is they're doing now that's broken, it's really important. But positioning relies on your uniqueness. It forces you to look at what's happening in the market. Why now for my company? What does the customer look like? Who's the customer that I'm speaking to? Who are the other companies that surround me in the market? When I started CabinetEM, one of the things that we did was we laid out our whole universe of potential competitors, because you have to look at your company in the context of what else is out there. And so, we started as a giant directory. We looked at folks that were review sites like G2 Crowd and Trust Radius, very, very well-funded companies. We looked at organizations that were just mapping marketing tools. So Scott Brinker does one of those charts. And what we realized after mapping it is that many of these were partners and not necessarily competitors. They lived in our space, but they didn't see the problem and solution exactly the same way. So we all saw a problem, but not what it is that we did. So positioning is important. And what it does is it informs your elevator pitch. So if nothing else, every single person in the accelerator who's gone through the accelerator should really have an elevator pitch, so that if you're walking into a cocktail party and someone says to you, what does your business do? You should be able to tell it to them in 10 words or less. And that starts to be your high level positioning. Okay. And then, if I think about, CabinetM, people say to me, what's CabinetM? I'll say, we're a discovery platform for the marketing industry. And someone might say, oh, that's sort of interesting. Tell me a little more. And then you get into your next sort of 2, 3, 4 paragraphs of discussion about why you exist and why you're important and what the pain is that you're solving in the marketplace. So that's positioning. It's really getting the words down on paper that describe the problem that you're solving, who you're solving it for. And not only should you look at that as a today thing, and I know that, startups get up and they face every day boldly, to sort of just keep marching and moving it along. But the reality is that you have to have a view not only of what you are today, but of what you want to become 3 to 5 years from now. So when I think about CabinetM and where we started, for example, we were a discovery platform, and now we think about ourselves as being the central platform sitting at the heart of marketing for all things marketing technology and tools. And what we've done in order to sort of protect that in terms of the way we talk about our business is really built into our positioning and then our messaging. Because there's the what do you own, and then there's the how do you describe it. And often what I'll suggest to, to young companies is to create a messaging document. Create a document so that if you hire someone into the organization, so let's say you're the CEO, right now you're doing all the marketing, you're selling, you're probably building the product too, but you say, today, I'm going to hire my marketer, and you find the perfect person, you really don't want to spend a week with them explaining every single thing. You want to be able to hand something over to say, here are the ways that we describe the company. Here are the customers we serve. Here's what our competitive environment looks like. It's really just doing a giant brain dump into a document, putting a table of contents on it, and then letting it live so that you can iterate on it. Because that's the nature of positioning also. Positioning is iterative. No one should believe that the company they start today is going to be the company that they ultimately build tomorrow. No company goes from A to Z the way you plan. If you have one that did it, please email me, because I look for those. It's so hard because you learn things about your market and your market changes around you. And you need to have your ear to the ground and be open to it and not be locked and loaded on anything.
Yeah. So, I've been investing in startups for over 25 years. So one of my favorite exercises to do is to pull out the original business plan or investor presentation for those that have successfully exited and just get a good belly laugh of, what V1 looked like. And it's always a windy road and journey. So I heard what you said about positioning. For a lot of people, if you look at positioning versus branding versus culture, It can all start bleeding together.
Yeah.
So how do you think about those three areas and kind of differentiate between them?
Yeah. So the way to think about it is that positioning, as I said, is the foundation upon which you build your messaging. It's about the way you talk about your organization. It's the way you articulate it. It's the words that you use. Branding is something that you build over time. So branding gives your company a personality. And when I say personality, because culture does also, so we'll go on to that next. But in terms of personality, the way you use language on your site gives you a personality. Are you formal? Are you selling to Fortune 100 companies and the finance organization? If you are, then the language that you use on your site and in your email is going to be far different than if you're selling to, a digital marketer who has, who's sitting in front of the screen all day and, trying programs and, they're going out to clubs and they're out all night. It's very, very different audiences. And so you have to understand who your audience is to start branding from a personality perspective, from a look and feel. So I am not going to use cartoon characters on a site that is focused on, financial technology, on fintech, but, I might use some stick figures, to do a little screencast or something. Oh my God, so sorry about that. Sorry about that. Boy, that's coming from somewhere else. Sorry, I'm going to actually shut my phone off and I apologize to you. Sorry, make that go away. So anyway, so branding, it requires consistency. Okay. You may choose a look and feel today so that when somebody sees your logo, when somebody sees something about you, they know that it's you and you keep nailing it up. It leverages look and feel. And it requires repetition over and over and over again. So people originally looked at CabinetM and said, oh my God, like that logo, it's a little, unusual. You're going to marketers and, aren't you selling to CMOs? It has little bubbles, it has a little happy M. You know what? Honestly, it's been repeated over and over again. When people see it, they know it's ours. We were recently at a conference in California, and our logo was all over the screens. Everybody used our slides. It was like our Nirvana moment. And we had these giant orange bags because our logo is an orange. And we had these giant orange bags with our logo across it. And people stopped us all over the place because they recognized the logo that people were using, or the look and feel that people were using in their slides, in the keynotes, in their various talks. And so that's really what branding is. Culture is really important. And there are actually some fabulous documents. If you want to read about culture, Netflix has an incredible document about culture. Pixability has a fantastic document about culture, because culture lays out how do you want it to feel every day when you show up in the office. And so we actually have a one-page document. It has about 10 bullets on it because, again, young organization, you're going to learn some things along the way. But one of the things that Anita and I realized very early on is that while we were manically emailing over the weekend, we didn't really want our employees to feel like if, in fact, they didn't respond right away, they were hosed. So, right in our company culture document, it says, you are not required to sit in front of your computer. If you would like to respond on Monday because we're crazy, it is fine. And, there are times where on a Sunday morning, I'll be sending out email, we'll get onto a Skype, our engineering team will hop on as well, but we don't require it. We actually implemented we have unlimited paid time off in the organization. We've told everyone here, and we're very small, but we've told everyone here, you need to take at least 2 weeks vacation. You need to be able to go. And if you have a child and they're playing soccer in the afternoon, I don't want to know that I have to dock you for 3 hours because you're going to go home and you're going to work at night anyway. And so we decided for 2 reasons, really. One is, we believe that people who care about an organization will put in the hours and do their work. And so we want everyone to be empowered to do that. But, figuring out what you want that to look like and feel like is really important, and writing it down so that when you have a new hire, they can actually look at those, 5 or 10 or 20 bullets and say, oh, this organization feels so much like me. We actually have interviewed people along the way who have asked us about our culture. And we give them the one-pager and say, here's what we try and live by. We're not perfect, but we try and live by this set of rules. And, and it's worked real well because you want people around you who see the world the same way.
Mm-hmm. So if I kind of take everything that you said and distill it, because we had Robin Albin a couple of weeks ago who talked about branding. She kind of parlayed branding into, what's the personal story of the company? Why do they care about what they're doing? And how's that translate into the end user? And how's that, like you said, translate into the logo and the look and feel and so forth? But it's both a reflection of the personal story of the company coupled with the target market. And then the positioning seems to me to be, I could be wrong in this, looking at the reality of the marketplace around you and choosing how you kind of position yourself relative to your story, the target end user, and what the reality of the marketplace is, and how you use the language to convey all that. Is that accurate?
I think that's a good summary. So, it's interesting because there are some folks that think about storytelling as straddling the line between messaging and branding.
Mm-hmm.
Because every company has a story, and often, if you think about companies who, when you tell your story about, or when you tell someone about them, you tell the story of how they started. That's sort of living in the branding world. But then there's the storytelling, which really saw the pain of the market, and that ends up dumping into your positioning. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it straddles both lines, but folks tend to push it more towards the branding side than the messaging side.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So talk to us about kind of the marketing plan today, reflecting the realities of today, and why a marketing plan is important, especially in a resource-constrained, time-constrained, company.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to lay out a strategy that looks at what are your marketing objectives? Like, what are you trying to achieve over the next year? So, in our case, we might say, during this tranche of money that we've raised, we'd like to have 25,000 users. And when we take in our next money, we might want to grow to 100,000. So companies often nail up those objectives around revenue, around market share, around position, around the customer goals, but it should be a reflection of the overall business goals. And you should only have like 1 to 5 of those. And what you want to do then is say, in the universe of things that I can do to affect those objectives, which ones do I believe will do it most successfully? So, so we live in a world of content, and the poor end user is being inundated with content, but the reality is it's here to stay. And so figuring out how you're going to deliver that and what's the most effective way for you to reach your audience, to deliver your messages, to get them to do the action you would like that meet your objectives is exactly why you're building your marketing plan. So, so if you start at the, sort of at the freemium way of doing it, it's really starting to talk to those reporters who most influence. So this is your offline stuff. It's, really telling your story to the people who can reach the largest number of folks. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to pick up a phone or email the people at TechCrunch or Mashable Today or, the Huffington Post. You want to start with folks that really, really can get it. So I believe that, that delivering messages start in a very concentric way, which is you start in the middle. And you tell your story and you tell it consistently over and over again. And you may do that by email. You may do that by sending out sort of, trigger emails to a target audience. Building your audience and building your email list is one of the single most important things that you need to do if you're an online business. You want to capture all of those people so that you can keep talking to them and convert them as appropriate. But that's your offline. You need to develop content. Content does not have to be big. It can be very, very small, depending on who it is you're talking to. So you really do want to use Twitter. You want to make sure that your website is really really well built out, and that you understand the flows through it. So if I did nothing else, I would make sure that I spent a lot of time watching a user come through my site if my business was dependent on my site. I would spend a lot of time sort of testing things with my audience. I'd go out and talk to people and see how people reach them in order to buy products like mine. But in the end, it's really about choosing programs that get you to your objectives, as quickly as you can, and testing and trying things to see if they work, and if they don't work, get out of there. So we spent a lot of time on SEO. No one should underestimate the value of SEO. Google is constantly sort of changing their algorithms, but it doesn't matter. What you care about is that you're telling your story in the richest way possible that will best reach those folks who are looking for it. And you need to really, if I did nothing else, I'd make sure every piece of my content, after I looked at my flows and my site, was very, very rich in SEO. And a lot of people will raise their hand and say, oh, I'm just going to do SEO and everyone will find me. But really doing it is hard, and it's built into the DNA of what you build. It's not just about a couple of words, and I'd spend the time to understand that.
Yeah, so bring in SEO expertise early as part of the...
So yes, or home grow it. Okay, so I actually see an enormous number of companies reaching into universities, and they have part-time folks. So in the Boston area, we have Wentworth, we have, Emerson right here, we have, WPI and MIT, but really the technical technical universities, the UMass Lowell's, and really Wentworth, we reach in there and we use students to do that work if we can't afford it. So we built this company very, very, very lean, and we did a lot of advertising on Craigslist in order to find $10 an hour resources. And so so we weren't going to talk about this, but let me insert this because I think it's really important and informing. So a lot of times it's hard to think about hiring because you don't have any money or you have very limited resource. But it is amazing the number of people that you can hire through Craigslist for very little money. And you can hire them for bounded tasks. You can hire them for longer engagements. We needed to create a tremendous amount of content. And in the beginning, we bootstrapped the company before we raised any angel funds. And we had an army at one point of $10 an hour content creators. We had 12 of them. And, they worked 10 to 20 hours a week. And we got better and better at hiring them. We realized that a certain type of college student was better than others. We hired a lot of disenfranchised mothers. We hired a lot of disenfranchised fathers. And we found a great group of people to do it. So that was sort of part one. When we had to do a lot of technical work, we made use of Upwork. And so for anyone who hasn't used Upwork or the old Odesk, now they're one, it is a way for you to find very, very low-cost resources to execute projects for you. So we have had WordPress sites developed in Upwork for $500. We used I think I spent some time earlier talking about the recommendation engine. We actually hired a data scientist in Serbia who worked with us on putting all the underpinnings of that in. The great thing about Upwork is that you can go in, you can see what these folks have done before. You can see how the people they've worked with have rated them. And they do an excellent job of articulating what their skill set is. And I highly recommend going in there. It's so inexpensive. Define the bounded task. So this is the really important thing for using either of these resources. You can't, because you're not seeing them every day and they're not in the desk or the chair next to you, you can't talk to them regularly. So what you have to do is be very clear in articulating what is the assignment, what are the milestones that show me that you're actually executing against the requirement I've given you, and when do we know that this is complete? And that's the most, if you're going to use those resources, really, really important to do it. Give them bounded tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so low cost resources to get very technical things done. And SEO is one of those resources that you actually can hire that way if you spend the time to look.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've been giving us some pretty fabulous practical advice, and I really appreciate that. I want to give the opportunity to the audience to see if they'd like to ask any questions. So if there's any questions, just let us know and we'll share it with Sheryl. So just to keep going, it's interesting. One of the challenges that I think entrepreneurs find is, understanding their market. And do they have to educate more, or is what they're doing not working from kind of a connecting with their target audience sense? And it's kind of a fine line sometimes between the two.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because the amount of work involved to educate a market versus giving the market something that they know they already have pain around, those are two different things. If in fact you choose the former, you need to understand that you're going to be blogging a lot, you're going to be doing newsletters, you're going to be out in front constantly, talking to the industry and helping to perpetuate your point of view. And so, that's one way of going. If someone already has that pain, it's really pretty easy, because then it's all about your positioning and messaging. You just basically keep talking, and you learn whether or not someone understands what you're saying, and you can always change it and tweak it.
So that's a really interesting point, and I've never heard it articulated in exactly that fashion, but it makes a lot of sense. You as an entrepreneur need to make an explicit decision. Are you in to educate and kind of be a disruptor, right? Obviously, Airbnb was a huge disruptor.
Yes.
And they went through a multi-year period where they were educating the marketplace. And then when the marketplace was ready, they took off. And then others, explicitly, do you feel like you have a pain point at hand that you need to bring to market now? And in that case, your market, messaging needs to nail it. If you're not getting uptake pretty immediately, then you haven't nailed it yet. That's a great summary. So what people often refer to those as is, the former is brave new world, right? You're really staking out some new ground. You're going to help people think about the world in a different way, something they've never thought about before. And then there's faster, better, cheaper, which is, I'm doing something today. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe I'm not doing it well. Maybe I'm doing something and I need to do something else alongside of it. That's the faster, better, cheaper. Okay. So we do have a question from Vidur. So do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you, Karen. Hey, Sheryl. Thank you for some fantastic information. I think I'm going to go with this recording once more.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So we just started KabinetEM, and it's a healthcare startup. So my question is around that. What kind of marketing channels does a healthcare company look at? Because most of our sales are going to be based on the fact that we could reach out to some key decision maker inside the hospital, like the CFO or the director or the president of the hospital. What kind of marketing channels should we be looking at?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because you actually have something that allows you to also build pull-through. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to those hospital administrators and asking them to do something, chances are that their consumers have some problem, or they have some problem interacting with the people that they serve. And so I think what you need to do is lots and lots of leadership building, lots of forward-looking, blogging. You want to really blog. You want to find, so often what I tell folks to do in your case is create what might be called an epic piece of content, and then slice it and dice it into different ways of using it. So you might tweet out pieces, you might blog pieces, but you create this big piece that you might use as a white paper just to educate those administrators. But then you help them to see what it is you've said to them in the big piece in lots of other places, and all you're doing is pulling information out from that big piece you already created, and often that'll have a 3 to 6 month life.
Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. So we're almost out of time here. Sheryl, is there any kind of wrap-up thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I would say is really, really spend the time in your market. Okay, don't sit inside of a building, inside of an office, thinking about your company. That's a good thing to do, but what you want to do is get outside and talk to customers and talk to people who could buy your product. Even if you're not selling it to them today, you want to hear their feedback, and you want to you really want to hear what it is that they say. And often I tell founders, hopefully, there's more than one. And I tell you, go together. Because often when one person is talking, you don't have the opportunity to hear. So there's someone else in the room that can hear with you. And so that's the first thing I'd say. And then the second thing I'd say is, I don't know how many companies in the accelerator are solo entrepreneurs, but if there are solo entrepreneurs, good. Go find yourself a co-founder, because on different days, I look across the table at Anita, and I am so grateful that I have somebody else who can share the highs of the high and the lows of the low, because you never know what the day is going to bring, and it's never steady state. It's always changing.
Well, you're definitely speaking the Dreamit tune, right? Because the first couple of weeks of Dreamit, all we focus on is getting our companies out in these customer immersion experiences.
That's great.
But we do have kind of a talk or an education piece on our entrepreneurs about really listening, because often you don't realize it, but you're trying to frame your next question,
yes,
and you're not hearing what someone's telling you.
Yeah.
So there's a real discipline to not only focus the operations of your companies to be a customer-driven discussion, even if it's a disruption that involves education. You still need to be out in the customer base to understand where they are today. But that talent of really hearing what people say is absolutely critical.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? You can't deliver something to a customer unless you hear what the customer has to say about it. It's just the way it is. So it's great that you do that. You're doing them proud.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I think you've given us all incredible, valuable nuggets of information. I think everybody needs to go to the CabinetEM website. This isn't, intended to be an advertisement for CabinetEM, but to have a resource that kind of lays out the landscape is, I think, a really important tool for our companies. So
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's so nice to speak to you, Karen. Take care. Bye, guys. Good luck.
Thank you.